Welcome to this episode of the Alignment with Jenn podcast. I am your host, Jenn, and today we are going to be talking about focus and productivity and how to be more focused and more productive even if you have ADHD. So I have been diagnosed with ADHD. I don't even really notice because I've just been that way my whole life. And so I want to share with you some of the tools and the strategies and the tactics to help you focus, whether you have ADHD or not, just to be a more productive human, because it feels really good to feel accomplished, to feel like you can sit down and focus and create the things that you want to create and create your mission and your vision within the world. So I am so excited to do this episode with you. I'm going to start off and I really want to talk about something that I personally find really interesting, which is the difference between the way the male brain and the female brain works and how most of the stuff that you will hear on like Huberman Labs podcast about focus and all those other podcasts are information that is really for a man. It can be very helpful for a woman, but there are some distinct differences about how a woman's brain works that I think can often create shame of why can't I focus like this? Why can I not be productive like this person? It's because our brains are designed to work differently. And I consider that difference beautiful and awesome. And there's no right or wrong way. It's just different. And so when you can understand that, you can not feel like there's something wrong with you. You can learn to work with it and you can learn to make it an asset that allows you to create and manifest the things that you want in your life far more easily. So we're going to go into that background and then we'll go into 8 mini habits that you can start today to radically increase your focus, your productivity, your ability to create and build and do all the fun stuff that is required for a business or a career. So I hope that you really enjoy this. The first thing that I want to mention is that focusing is not necessarily about trying harder. Yes, part of it is actually focusing your attention, but a big part of it is actually giving your brain the conditions that it needs in order to focus well. So that's really what we want to get out of this episode. So the first thing is how men and women focus differently. So men have more single point focus versus women have what is called diffuse awareness. And that is the result of the different hormones and the balances of the hormones in the brain. So male brains typically have more testosterone. Female brains typically have more estrogen, especially, you can look at the different hormonal cycles, but we'll say by and large, women have more estrogen. And that creates more of a diffuse awareness. And if you think about evolution, it's actually really fascinating because think about a woman. A woman was a gatherer and a male was a hunter. A male would go out and he would be singly focused on hunting, right? Shooting the bow to get the deer to bring it back. It was quiet and he was focused on a single task, right? That's how the male brain developed. The female brain developed very differently in gathering, right? Taking care of the kids, gathering and picking berries, being in community with women, right? Having conversations with other women while she's picking berries, right? So women have a very different way of focusing and we are able to focus on many things at one time, right? I always think about my sister. So my sister has 2 little kids and she can be in the kitchen having a conversation with me, cooking something on the stove and still be fully well aware of where both of her kids are, right? Versus the male brain is going to be very different and is able to focus in a very different way. And so that's the first thing I want you to understand is that, yes, the female brain can focus in that same way where we can sit down and focus on a task, but it can feel more difficult and it can also be more difficult if we try to do it for a very long period of time, simply because we don't have those higher levels of testosterone. And I'm not saying that you can't do that, but I'm saying there's ways we can make it more effective and efficient to work with how our brains work. Other important thing to know is that the female brain is much, much more interconnected between the logic and the intuition portions of the brain because the brain itself is actually much more interconnected. And so the female brain can be really, really good at integrating information. And this is why we think about female intuition, right? It's like you can just walk in and you just know something about someone, or you just have a knowing about something in a way that not all men do as naturally. And the reason for that is partly because of the way that our brains are structured versus the male brain can be more compartmentalized. There's less of that interconnectivity between the 2 hemispheres of the brain. And so as a result, that male brain is more able to focus on that single task. Okay. So how do we work with this? As I think 90% of my audience is female. Welcome to the brave males listening. How do we work with that, right? How do we work with the fact that our brains function a little bit differently? Well, I consider it to be a gift. I consider everything about being a woman to be a gift. And for men, everything about being a man to be a gift as well, because we're both beautiful and different in our own ways. How women can focus differently. So I'm going to give you 3 tips for this, and then we'll get into more of my personal tips of how I personally like to focus and things that have helped me more experientially. So the first thing for women is to do more focused sprints. So if you've ever used Pomodoros, so Pomodoro, there's like an app on your phone if you just search Pomodoro, and it breaks it up into these 25-minute chunks of focus and then a 5-minute break. That works really well for the female brain, because what I personally will notice is when I'm sitting down to work, I'll think of like, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this, right? And so I'll sometimes go and do those things. Versus what you can do is do the Pomodoro, do 25 minutes. And if an idea comes up of something else, just jot it down. I will always have a notebook next to me where I can put those thoughts that are just coming in. And I find that works incredibly, incredibly well for me personally. So I can focus, because I do have a hard time focusing for long periods of time. What you can do in those breaks that will make it even more beneficial is not to like take a break from working and then pick up your phone and scroll. That's going to not be as effective at recharging your brain and allowing you to focus as moving your body. So if you get up and you stretch for 5 minutes, or you walk around the house and maybe you put some things away, or you go on a 5-minute walk, but breaking up your focus is going to help you feel like you're not working against yourself, and that you're really able to actually focus and sit there and do the things that you want to accomplish, and you will accomplish them much faster than if you're like, okay, I'm going to focus on this for an hour. That can feel very difficult. Another thing that you can do is shift your environment. And I'll get into this a little bit more in a moment, but when you shift your environment, it helps to let go and sit down the things that have been on your mind. So something that Alison Armstrong talks about is she talks about putzing. And for the female, what it is it's basically where you kind of walk around, and you've probably felt yourself do this, and you're just kind of doing little tasks, right? Like I'll straighten the books on my bookshelf. I might put some, toilet paper in the downstairs bathroom. I might go pet my dog. I might go send a text message. And that actually can feel really good for the female brain, because it's allowing you to focus on these different things. And so giving yourself that ability to do that, but then also shifting your environment, let's say going to work at a cafe, or going to work at the library, or going somewhere where you don't have all of these environmental cues speaking to you. Something Alison Armstrong also talks about is she's like, basically a female, if her environment is out of order because of her diffuse awareness, she's noticing it. So we'll notice the sock on the floor. We'll notice that the corner of the bed spread is turned up, right? And we'll need to fix those things. Do you ever feel like you just need to fix things and clean things up before you can sit down and focus? That's because on some level, your mind is noticing them and is aware of them, versus the male brain doesn't work like that. The male brain, if he walks by a sock on the ground and it's not something he's focusing on, he actually just may not notice it, which when I first learned that, I was like, that blows my mind. How could you not notice it, right? And females can get very frustrated about this, but our brains work differently. So changing your environment can help, because it lets go of those signals, right? If you're in your office, right, and you're thinking you need to organize your office, going to a cafe or going somewhere where all that you're going to be doing is focusing on what you're doing can be really helpful for calming down our diffuse awareness. Okay, so let's get into these little recommendations that I have for you. So the first one is actually changing your environment. So I find that I work best when I go to a cafe and I put on noise canceling headphones, sometimes with music, sometimes without, but I feel like that puts me in the zone more than anything else, because there's nothing I'm not going to go organize the cafe, right? I'm going to just sit there and focus on what's on my computer. I'll put it on do not disturb. I'll put my phone away so I'm not wanting to pick it up. And that can be really, really helpful. I have a friend and she's like, I can't work at cafes. I have to be home alone. I have to have headphones on that are noise canceling and just focus on what I'm doing. But the more that you can make your environment not something that will distract you, and that's going to be a little different for each of us, the better. I also find that I work really well when it's dark outside. So like early in the morning or late at night, because then again, those environmental cues are not speaking to me, right? My refrigerator doesn't need to be reorganized and all of these things. Right? It's like creates this almost tunnel that's available. So think about for you, what might that be, right? Another thing that I recommend is I recommend using matcha because there's a little bit of caffeine in it, but it also has L-theanine, which also promotes focus. I personally find that that works a lot better than coffee. If you're a coffee girly, no shade, do your thing. But matcha can be really, really helpful because of that L-theanine and because of the way that the caffeine is released is it's slower versus coffee tends to have a stronger spike, which can cause anxiety, it can cause stress, it can cause a stronger cortisol response in the body. So that's something that I would really, really think about is making that switch, even just for those days when you are focused and you're wanting to work on something. Probably my biggest thing for being able to focus is sleep and really, really optimizing my sleep. I actually just created a really good sleep stack, which I'll share with you in a moment. But when you are able to sleep, your brain is cleansing itself, right? That's why when you don't sleep, you feel kind of groggy in the morning. So when your brain is able to clean itself and you wake up and you're like, wow, like bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, you're able to focus better. So prioritizing your sleep, going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, allowing yourself to actually sleep well, not scrolling before you go to bed, getting blue light blockers. I'll put it in the show notes. I have a link to my Amazon store and I have blue light blocker recommendations, some different things that help and promote sleep. If you're interested in me doing just an episode on sleep, you can comment and I'll share a lot of the recommendations because I've done extensive research on how to sleep well because I feel it's the most important foundation for the rest of our physical life. What I like to do to sleep well is number one, I don't do screens an hour to 2 hours before bed. I wear blue light blockers. Sometimes I will take a hot shower, especially if I work out in the evening, I'll take a hot shower and that can help. I also will take 2 different supplements. So I take magnesium glycinate, and I also take L-theanine that will help me sleep. So those are the main things that I do to promote sleep, and that has a cascade effect on the rest of your life. I've talked about this in other episodes, but the cascade effect is essentially that every single thing that you do has a ripple effect into the rest of your life, right? Going to bed and scrolling before you go to bed is not just 15 minutes of scrolling before you go to bed. It's lower quality sleep, right? It might be programming your subconscious mind for something you don't want because we know that's when our subconscious mind is more open when we're falling asleep. And so if you're scrolling doom TikTok or like conspiracy theory TikTok, and that's what's going into your brain before you go to sleep, I'm sorry, but that is not good for your subconscious mind. That is instilling fear. That is instilling scarcity. That's instilling all sorts of programming you don't want to be instilling, right? So that is the cascade effect I'm talking about. And that's the cascade effect that sleep has on your ability to focus. It directly impacts it. So if you're struggling to focus, don't just look at that, look at your sleep as well. The other thing that I have found, this has been an absolute game changer for me, is containing my tasks. So I film content every week, right? And my goal is always to produce 14 reels. Do I always produce 14 reels? No. But what I always do is I always will film a certain amount of time each week, and I will always write reels a certain amount of time each week. What that allows me to do is I say, okay, on Mondays for an hour and a half, I'm writing reels. I know I only have an hour and a half and my goal is to write 7 reels. So if I don't get it done, that means I don't hit my goal of 14 reels produced a week. So if that's the case, I'm going to be a lot more focused because I'm very clear on what do I want to accomplish in that time. And I'm very clear on I only have this certain amount of time, right? I can't lollygag because I have a bunch of other stuff going on that day. So when we feel like we have endless time to do something, it's going to take up that time, right? They say that the task will take up the time that is allotted. It's like if you had a report due in school, a lot of us would wait until the very last minute to do it because we had 2 weeks to do it. So giving yourself, even artificially, especially if you're in a business, I've learned because I've worked from home and worked for myself for a really long time now, that I have to give myself that containment or else it won't happen, or it'll take way longer than it needs to take. So that can be exceptionally helpful. Another thing that is really exceptionally helpful, especially for the female brain, is walks, mini walks throughout the day. So I probably go on 3 mini walks throughout the day. They can be 10 minutes, they can be 30 minutes. It doesn't matter. It could be even 5 minutes. And that is going to reset your brain. It is going to open up your creativity. It's going to allow you to go and sit back down feeling happier, feeling more elevated. Honestly, I feel like one of the greatest manifestation secrets is just walking, as funny and as simple as that sounds. Another thing to do for the focus is to delegate things. And this is something I struggled with for a long time. And that is things that you don't need to be doing. And I will qualify this by, if something is below a certain dollar amount and I can pay somebody this certain dollar amount to do it, I will delegate it and I will have my assistant do it, or I will hire someone to do it, because I want to be focusing on the things that have the biggest return on investment for me. And I know that I probably have 4 or 5 hours of exceptional focus, honestly, probably 4, maybe 3 some days, of exceptional focus a day. So I need that to be focused on my biggest, most important things, right? Like writing podcasts, writing content, doing courses and creating courses for my clients, things that are going to have the biggest bang and that I can't pay someone else to do. That is going to be exceptionally helpful for you. So think about what is something, and if you're like, well, I can't afford to delegate it, maybe you can trade with someone. Maybe you can get creative. Maybe you can not buy as many lattes each week or spend as much money on X, so you can delegate those things. That's going to free up energetic energy. I posted about this on my story, the energetic ROI. I love this concept. I learned it from one of my coaches. And it's the idea that every single thing you buy doesn't just have an ROI or a lack of an ROI, but there's also this energetic ROI, meaning that you can gain positive energy from it. And energy is the most important thing, right? It's everything. So I'll give an example. So I just bought a new car, and it's a self-driving car. And I was really excited to manifest it. And then as soon as I got it, I was like, dang, did I make a bad decision? Did I need to? Kind of those old stories coming up. Did I need to get a new car? Right? Programming. Then I realized I've had this car for only 2 days now. I was like, wow, I feel so much more relaxed when I drive. I love being in this car. I love how good it feels to drive to Del Mar or drive here or drive to these different places where I live, because I'm just chilling, right? And I get to experience this really cool technology. That is an energetic ROI. My relaxation, the calming of my nervous system. I texted my mom and I was like, this is healing my nervous system, because there's not a ton of energy going into driving, but there is a portion of your energy, right? So you want to think of, where can I get an energetic ROI by delegating certain things that I hate doing or I really dislike doing, right? If you really dislike doing your taxes, hiring an accountant, right? Seeing where can I give myself back more energy, because that is going to have a compound effect in your life and in your bank account. And then the next one for focus, this one is juicy. I love this one, is rewiring your subconscious patterns and limitations. So something I very, very often see is people will come to me and they'll be like, I want to start a business. Okay, we'll use a coaching business, for example. They'll say, but I really struggle I'll sit down to write content and I'll just feel blank in the brain, or I feel like I can't focus. Or I'll sit down to have a conversation with someone and I feel like I'm just distracted. That to me is a very clear signal, like a red light flashing, that there are some subconscious blocks around what you are trying to accomplish. Because when we feel like we just can't focus, when we feel like we're procrastinating, when we feel like we're making excuses to do something, it is because on some level, our subconscious mind fears that that action will produce something that's unsafe. So for the coaching business example, right, the fear could be that if I build this coaching business up, then I'm going to be so stressed out that I'm going to neglect my health. And I don't want to neglect my health. I did that in the past, right? That was one of mine. Personal story. Another one could be that if I make a lot of money, then my family is going to judge me and they're not going to want to be around me because they always talked about how rich people are greedy. So I don't want to make a lot of money. That leads to procrastination and not being able to focus and creating content. That's how clever your mind is. Another one could be that you want to create content for your business, but you are terrified of the judgment and the negative comments that can happen if your content starts to do well and go viral. So you will feel blank in the brain, or maybe you'll be less creative, or you'll not have any ideas around creating it. It's amazing to me how if our subconscious mind doesn't want something, it's like shutting it down, right? That door is closed, locked, and the key has been thrown away. That's why another reason I'm so big on rewiring your subconscious mind. And again, if you want help with that, that's what I do inside of my programs. It is what I have spent my life studying and becoming an expert at. So if you're interested, send me either an email at hello@jenditzese.com. I will put that email in the show notes below this episode that says the word podcast, or send me a message on Instagram at alignment with Jenn with the word podcast, and I'll send you a video on that program and the process that I use. The next thing, this is the last habit I have for you, and then I have a couple of little mini habits, is dopamine stacking. I did a whole episode on dopamine. Go listen to that episode. It's called The Dopamine Trap. So I'm not going to go into it here, but if you are using cheap sources of dopamine, like scrolling, a bunch of texting, things like that, what is happening is that you're depleting your dopamine for being able to focus as much. I highly recommend if focus is big for you, listen to that episode. So what you can do is you can design your day in order to promote the positive forms of dopamine, right? So staying off your phone for the first certain chunk of the day, first hour, first 30 minutes, whatever it might be, right? Designing your workspace so there's less distractions, using music and headphones. All of these things are going to allow you to promote and create positive dopamine that will allow you not only to want to do the task because it will feel good, but also to allow you to stay focused during that time. Something to know as well is when we are starting a task that isn't super dopamine rewarding, isn't like super enticing, like eating a delicious cookie. Say we're sitting down to write a podcast episode, for example. Yes, that's rewarding, but sometimes you can feel that resistance, even if it's something you want to do. You need to get past the 10-minute mark, because at the 10-minute mark, we get a hit of dopamine, and then we get even more dopamine throughout, and then at the end. So if you can get past that little part, you're going to feel better. And then if you do the Pomodoros and you do 25 minutes, you're going to get a hit of dopamine for getting to check off that you did that one Pomodoro, right? That one focus block. So that can be exceptionally beneficial for you. Okay, this is the last one I'll say. Using meditation as a break. So what I will oftentimes do is at like 2 or 3 p.m. when my brain feels kind of foggy, I will meditate to kind of clean out my brain, and that can help me to refocus as well. So I hope that you try some of these habits, and I hope they're exceptionally helpful for you. Please leave a comment and tell me which ones you found the most valuable, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.